Darkness was not just the absence of light. It was alive. It moved, it whispered, and it hunted. For 40,000 years, the Nightborn ruled the earth. They were ancient, older than human history itself. No one knew where they came from, only that they owned the night. And humanity was hiding. Deep beneath the ruined cities, under the earth, the last survivors lived in fear. They had never seen the sun. The surface belonged to the Nightborn. Anyone who tried to leave never returned. But something was about to change. Daniel tightened his grip on the rusted metal pipe in his hands. It wasn't a real weapon, but it was all he had. He stood near the entrance of the underground tunnels, staring at the sealed gate that separated his people from the surface. Behind him, the elders whispered warnings. Don't go near the gate. Don't listen to the night. Don't let them see you. Daniel knew the rules. Everyone did. The Nightborn could smell fear. They could hear heartbeats in the dark. If they sensed you, they would come. And when they came, no one survived. But Daniel was tired of hiding. Every night, he heard the screams of those who tried to escape. And every night he wondered, what if we fight back? A loud thud echoed through the tunnels. The ground shook. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Daniel's heart pounded. Something was above them. The elders rushed to seal the metal gates. They're here, one of them whispered. Daniel's blood ran cold. He could hear it now. The whispers. The voices of the Nightborn. They weren't speaking words. They never did. But the sound crawled into his ears, into his mind. It was inside him, filling his head with fear. Then something moved beyond the gate. A shadow, darker than the night itself. It wasn't walking. It was gliding, floating, shifting like black smoke. Daniel stepped back. The elders held their breath. For a moment, there was silence. Then, bang! The gate bent inward, metal groaning under the force. The elders gasped. They'd never tried to break in before. Another bang. The gate cracked. Daniel's grip on his pipe tightened. His body screamed at him to run, but something inside him whispered, no more hiding. For 40,000 years, humanity had been prey. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, humanity would fight back. The gate bent inward, metal groaning under the force of the Nightborn outside. For 40,000 years, they had hunted humans. For 40,000 years, no one had ever fought back. Until now. Daniel's heart pounded, but he didn't move. The elders pulled him back, whispering in fear. Don't fight them. You can't kill the Nightborn. You'll bring doom to all of us. But Daniel wasn't listening. He had spent his whole life hiding. His whole life afraid. Not anymore. Bang! The gate finally shattered. Darkness poured in like a living thing, twisting and crawling into the tunnels. A figure stepped forward, tall, slender, wrong. Its body was like smoke and bone, shifting in ways the human eye couldn't fully understand. Its face was not a face at all, just empty blackness, with two glowing eyes that burned like dying stars. The elders fell to their knees in terror. The Nightborn had come inside. Daniel's breath was ragged. He could feel its eyes on him, pressing into his mind, whispering fear into his thoughts. Run, the voice in his head urged. Hide. Obey. But something changed inside him. Instead of fear, he felt something else. Something new. Anger. Daniel clenched his fists. The elders said the Nightborn couldn't be killed, that weapons were useless, but no one had ever tried. His grip tightened around the rusted pipe. His body trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper, something older than the Nightborn's rule. A forgotten instinct. The instinct to fight back. The Nightborn moved, gliding toward him, its darkness reaching. Daniel swung the pipe with all his strength. For the first time in 40,000 years, a Nightborn screamed. The pipe connected. The creature reeled back, its form shaking, breaking, as if something about Daniel's attack had hurt it. The elders gasped. This was impossible. The Nightborn weren't invincible. They could be hurt. They could be killed. The creature let out a terrible shriek and vanished into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as it had come. The tunnels fell into silence. Daniel's hands shook. His pulse raced. The elders stared at him in shock. And then realization settled in. He had wounded a god of the night. And now they would all pay the price. The tunnels were silent. The air felt heavy, thick with something unseen. Daniel stood frozen, gripping the rusted pipe that had done the impossible. It had hurt a Nightborn. For 40,000 years, these creatures ruled Earth without challenge. For 40,000 years, humanity had been prey. But tonight, that changed. The elders stared at Daniel in horror. "You doomed us," one whispered. "The Nightborn will come for all of us now," another said. Daniel didn't care. His pulse roared in his ears. He had spent his entire life afraid of the dark. Now, for the first time, the dark was afraid of him. He turned to the elders. "They were always going to kill us. Hiding won't save us. We have to fight." They looked at him like he was mad. But then, a distant scream echoed through the tunnels. The Nightborn were coming. Daniel ran. He had to warn the others. The underground city wasn't built for war. It was built for hiding. Tunnels stretched for miles beneath the ruined surface, carved by generations of survivors who never dared to look up at the sky. But now, there was nowhere to hide. As he reached the main chamber, hundreds of people looked up at him. Fear filled their eyes. They had heard the scream. They knew what was coming. Daniel didn't hesitate. "We have a chance," he said, his voice steady. "I hurt one of them." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "They aren't gods. They can be hurt, maybe even killed." An old man stepped forward, shaking his head. "Foolish boy, we have no weapons that work on them." Daniel raised his pipe. This worked. The crowd stilled. A young woman, Sarah, stepped closer. Why? Why did it work? Daniel didn't know, but he felt it, the spark inside him, the rage that had burned when he stood his ground. The Nightborn fed on fear. But what if fear wasn't the only thing inside humans? What if anger, willpower, and defiance were the keys? Sarah looked at the crowd. "Maybe he's right. Maybe we've been afraid for too long." A murmur spread. Hope, a dangerous thing, began to grow. And then, the lights flickered. A deep rumbling shook the tunnels. And they arrived. The Nightborn poured in like living shadows, crawling down walls, emerging from cracks, their hollow eyes burning. For 40,000 years, humans had only run. But tonight, they stood. Daniel charged first, swinging his pipe with all his strength. Another scream tore through the air as a Nightborn staggered back, its form flickering, its shape breaking. Others followed. Sarah grabbed a sharpened metal rod. A blacksmith raised his hammer. A dozen, then 100 survivors picked up anything they could find. And then, for the first time in history, humanity fought back. The underground tunnels shook as the war began. For the first time in 40,000 years, humans were not running. They were fighting. The Nightborn moved like shadows, twisting and shifting, their bodies half real, half nightmare. Their hollow eyes burned like distant stars. Their whispers crawled into human minds, trying to suffocate them with fear. But tonight, fear wasn't enough. Daniel's pipe slammed into another Nightborn, and the creature shrieked, its form shattering like smoke in the wind. Sarah stabbed forward with her sharpened rod, and another fell back, its shape cracking. More people joined the fight. A blacksmith's hammer crushed through the darkness. A hunter's knife sliced into a shifting shadow. A mother, who had lost her children to the Nightborn, swung a burning torch. The flames licked at the creatures, and for the first time, the humans saw it. The Nightborn feared fire. Daniel's mind raced. Fire, light, heat, they weren't just feeding on fear, They were creatures of the cold void. "They burn," he shouted. "Used fire." Torches were lit. Oil lamps were smashed. The tunnels blazed with a fire humanity had not held in thousands of years. The Nightborn screamed. For the first time in their long, endless rule, they felt pain. They began to retreat. Daniel saw them slipping back into the cracks, vanishing into the deeper tunnels. But he knew this wasn't over. They weren't running because they were beaten. They were learning. The Nightborn had ruled for millennia because they adapted. If humanity had found a way to hurt them, then they would find a way to strike back. And next time, they would not come as hunters. They would come as destroyers. As the fires burned in the tunnels, Sarah turned to Daniel, breathing hard. "We won this battle." Daniel looked at the blackened tunnels, the retreating shadows, the flickering flames. "No," he said. "The real war starts now." The fires still burned in the tunnels, but the victory was hollow. Daniel stood at the edge of the battlefield, gripping his rusted pipe. Around him, humans cheered, laughing, crying, celebrating the first victory in 40,000 years. But deep in his chest, something felt wrong. The Nightborn didn't run. They didn't fear. Yet tonight, they had retreated, which meant only one thing. They were coming back, stronger. Sarah wiped soot from her face, her eyes bright with newfound hope. "We finally have a chance, Daniel. We can fight them." Daniel wasn't so sure. He turned to the old blacksmith, still holding his hammer. "How much oil do we have? How many torches?" The blacksmith hesitated. "Not enough for a real war." Daniel clenched his jaw. The Nightborn had ruled for thousands of years. They had destroyed empires, wiped out entire civilizations. Fire alone wouldn't win this. They needed something more, something stronger, something deadly. And then, the ground shook. The tunnels groaned, as if something massive had moved above them. Then came the whispers. Not the soft, creeping whispers from before. No, this was deeper, louder, more like thunder. Sarah's eyes widened. "They're coming back." The flames flickered. The very air turned cold. The humans who had just been celebrating now stood frozen, their breath visible in the chilling air. Then, the shadows moved. Something massive slithered through the darkness. Not just one Nightborn, hundreds, thousands. And behind them, something bigger. Daniel's blood ran cold. They weren't fighting us seriously before. Sarah swallowed hard. Then what are they doing now? The whispers grew louder. The walls cracked. And then, from the darkness, a voice spoke. Not a whisper, not a hiss, but a deep, ancient voice that shook the tunnels. "You have broken the balance." Daniel took a step back, his heart hammering. The Nightborn were not just hunters. They were gods of the dark. And now, humanity had angered them. The tunnels collapsed. Stone and metal shattered as a force like a hurricane ripped through the underground city. Humans screamed as they were pulled into the void. Daniel grabbed Sarah's hand. "Run." The last survivors turned and fled. But deep in the darkness, something was watching. The war had truly begun. The tunnels were gone. Thousands of survivors, once hidden beneath the earth, had been wiped out in an instant. The ancient stone walls had crumbled, swallowed by the darkness. The Nightborn had returned, not as hunters, but as executioners. Daniel and a handful of others had barely escaped. Now, they stood on the surface for the first time in their lives. And what they saw shook them to the core. The sky was wrong. It wasn't black, like the endless night they had always believed. It was alive, swirling with shadows that twisted and crawled. Above them, enormous figures moved, as if the sky itself was a living thing. Sarah gripped Daniel's arm. "The Nightborn. They aren't just creatures." Daniel stared, his breath caught in his throat. There, the sky itself. The Nightborn weren't just hiding in the darkness. They were the darkness. The survivors moved carefully across the ruins of the old world. Cities had long turned to dust, skyscrapers had become crumbling skeletons, and rivers had dried into lifeless cracks. Yet something remained. As they searched through the ruins, Daniel found it. A bunker hidden beneath the rubble of an old city. A door made of metal stronger than anything they had ever seen. And inside, they found the last weapons of humanity. The bunker was ancient, built long before the Nightborn had fully taken control. Inside, they found records, old writings from a lost civilization. They spoke of a time when humans ruled the world, when they fought the darkness and nearly won. Sarah read aloud. "We discovered their weakness too late. Fire was only the beginning. But there was something more, something they feared above all else." She turned to Daniel, her hands shaking. "There's something else, something stronger than fire." Daniel's mind raced. "What is it?" She read further. "The Nightborn exist where light cannot reach. But before they took the world, there was something even they could not defeat." She paused. Daniel stepped closer. What was it? Sarah swallowed hard. The sun. Realization hit Daniel like a hammer. The Nightborn weren't just creatures of the dark. They were trapped in the dark. For 40,000 years, the world had been in eternal night. But if they could bring back the sun, they could end this war. Forever. Outside, the sky shifted. The Nightborn knew. They had heard. The ground shook as their final army rose from the depths. The last battle had begun. The ground trembled. The air turned icy cold. The sky, once shifting with shadows, now boiled with rage. The Nightborn had heard them. They knew what the humans had found, and they would not let them succeed. Daniel, Sarah, and the last survivors ran. The bunker had given them the answer, but knowing it wasn't enough, they had to act. They had to bring back the sun. The records in the bunker spoke of an ancient machine, a forgotten relic from the old world. It had been built by the last civilization before the Nightborn's rule, a desperate attempt to push back the darkness. But they had failed. Now it was humanity's last hope. Daniel led the group through the ruins, dodging the creeping shadows. The Nightborn were everywhere, twisting through the air like living smoke, their whispers screaming in his mind. "You cannot win. The dark is forever. You belong to us." Daniel ignored them. Ahead, buried beneath rubble and vines, he saw it, the machine. A colossal tower, ancient and rusted, with shattered panels and cables as thick as tree trunks. It had been designed to do one thing: reignite the sky. Sarah and the others worked fast, reconnecting wires, restoring power. The machine ran on something old, something powerful, hidden beneath the earth for millennia. The Nightborn must have known about it. That's why they buried it. That's why they destroyed the old world. Because they feared this machine. Because they feared the sun. A screech ripped through the air. The Nightborn king had arrived. A towering figure, unlike the others, made of pure darkness, shifting like a storm. Its eyes burned with the light of dead stars. It descended from the sky, its body stretching across the horizon, an endless void. You will not bring back the light. The machine was not ready. They needed more time. Daniel knew what he had to do. He turned to Sarah, his voice steady. "Finish it." She shook her head. "You won't survive." He smiled. "I don't plan to." Then, gripping his rusted pipe, his first weapon, his first act of resistance, Daniel charged. The Nightborn king roared, its voice shaking the air. But Daniel did not stop. He leaped into the darkness, swinging his weapon with everything he had. His body burned with something the Nightborn had never understood: defiance, willpower, humanity. And in that moment, Sarah flipped the switch. The machine roared to life. Light exploded across the sky. The first sunrise in 40,000 years. The darkness screamed. The Nightborn withered, their bodies breaking, twisting, burning in the golden light. The Nightborn king let out a final cry before it was erased from existence. The night was over. The war was over. The sun had returned, and humanity had taken back the earth.